Hey, welcome back to the Smell of Logic channel. I am Ramona, and on this channel we read Reddit stories. This one is going to be about the strangest people that you have met, or at least one of the strangest people you've ever met. Before we get started though, if you are interested, I do some coloring books over on Amazon.com. I release one every week, every Monday. There's flowers, there's houses, there's chicks in dresses and, native costumes. There's caves and crystals. There's all kinds of stuff there. There's also some color your own paper dolls, if you're interested in that. Something I always liked to do as a kid, but that was just me. But check it out over on my Amazon author page. It's in the description of all of my videos. But now let's get to the actual video. You ready? So this is, who is the strangest person you have ever met? And this is part 2. Ready? Here we go. I was sitting in a bar having lunch and a pint. A guy at a table over starts talking to me. He's white. Not vampire white, but Caucasian. He tells me about himself. I kind of ask, I guess. He's a recently released con. He doesn't want to go back. He wants a decent job and a decent chick to bang. Fair enough. I'm neither of those things. He calls himself Aborigine, and I'm not sure if he was adopted. He calls them blacks and tells me I can't call them that, the N-word. He asks if I thought black was fair. They're not black Nigerian as black, etc. Easily 20 minutes harping on about this. That's strange, but I've had weirder conversations. There was a man who approached me and my son at the minute market one afternoon to scold me for calling my kid dude. I said what any sane person would do and told him to go F himself and mind his own business. I make my way to the checkout line. He decides that standing behind me and begging me to go on a date with him was reasonable. I again told him to F off and leave me alone. The cashier told him to leave. We went outside and I was waiting for my ride. He began to explain how badly he needs me to go on a date with him, or else his mother would never stop making fun of him. At this point, he was harassing me, so I went back inside and asked the cashier to make him leave. She obliged. He left, with much more protest, of course. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm working my shift at a gas station and I hear 2 men yelling at each other in the parking lot. I walk around the corner to see what's going on. That's when I see a huge, redneck-looking guy punch this guy in the face, and he flew back and blood was spurting from his nose. The guy's girlfriend was yelling at him to get in the car before the cops came. I went over to the punch victim, and who else could it have been but the effing weirdo from the Minute Mart. He was demanding I call the police for him and kept pretending like I wouldn't understand what he was asking, until he finally snapped and started screaming at me that he was assaulted and I had help. And I had helped his assailant by refusing to call the police. I handed it off to the manager, and they took care of it. I've never been so happy to see someone get their nose broken in my life. That guy was awful and painfully creepy. He wore these really thick, crooked framed glasses and had his pants tucked into his socks. Also, he harasses women, apparently, so F that guy. I met this guy Dave at AA. I try to be friendly to everyone I meet in the room, so I gave this dude my contact information. He added me on Facebook the day after I met him. His entire page was dedicated to how much he loves funerals. Cover photo is an empty casket. Profile photo was of him at a funeral home. He reposted news articles about new casket building techniques. It was effed. Gonna keep this short. Some MF at a bus stop was, from what I gathered, stoned. I was waiting for the bus, and this guy just gives me some life advice, then proceeds to brag about belongings. Then this guy just pulls out a bag of weed. Funny thing is, this is a crowded road with an officer on it. This guy was an idiot, or stoned, either one. I went to college with this one guy. He had a lot of sex with a lot of women, wore only toe socks and toe shoes 365 days of the year, including graduation, even in the snow. Mainly dressed like a 12-year-old anime character. Neon green shorts with an orange, purple, red, or some other mismatched color shirt, and even one with cartoon characters or bananas on it. Competitively played Super Smash Brothers to the point that it was unhealthy. Worked out and drank some protein shakes that you can imagine. Also was a juggler. This dude did no drugs and didn't even drink. He was just like that. It was awesome, and I hope he's doing well. If my acquaintances used Reddit, I'm pretty sure many of them would say that I was the strangest person they know. Definitely my first year art teacher in high school. So I'm 16 now and in my 5th year of high school in Scotland, and I'm studying subjects that I'm interested in, and I'd say that I enjoy my education overall. It was a completely different story in the earlier years, though. Let me start by saying that first and second year pupils have no choice in what subjects they take. Instead, they have to pretty much take pretty much every single one. This leads to their timetables being a large mess of different classes which only are taken a couple times a week. I didn't enjoy this, and one of the classes that I specifically disliked was my first year was in art. This classroom was messy. There was never any actual work prepared for us half the time, and as always, without fail, absolutely freezing. This is all the fault of our teacher, who we'll call Mr. Robert. We were all weirded out by this guy. For some reason, or for one thing, he had a habit of pronouncing words incorrectly, usually with the weird squee sound spread randomly between his vocabulary. As well as this, a lot of time we were lucky if we were given any actual work to do. We were mostly just told to sit and draw or cut out shapes. Of course, we were a bunch of 11-year-olds, so we were totally cool with practically doing nothing for 40 minutes. The remaining 10 minutes, however, were always the weirdest. Instead of making sure that his class had literally doing anything productive, he would instead choose to entertain us with a little quiz or a squizzle, as he would call it. He did this at the end of every period, so it became something we looked forward to. The quizzes were simple enough, usually geographical or historical in nature. The first person to raise her hand and call the correct answer after he asked a question was rewarded. The rewards, however, is where it starts to get a little creepy. If you answered the question correctly, you had to leave your seat and walk to Mr. Roberts' desk at the front of the room, where you then had to reach into a bag and take a small hard candy, usually a sherbet lemon or something like that. The weird part is the bag was always behind the desk on the floor, next to his legs, so the child who won it would have to make their way around his desk, disappear from the view of the rest of the class, effectively alone with Mr. Roberts for a few seconds. Basically, repeat this process of doing nothing for a while and then having a squizzle twice a week for a year. That was my experience with my first year art class. But it gets much weirder in my second year art class. So I get landed with Mr. Robert again, but it seems that he wants to take this year a bit more seriously. He actually did work with us, various different projects spanning different artsy topics. Near the end of the year, however, he did something very creepy. He tells us all that we're going to draw each other's portraits, which we all thought was pretty cool. He then gets us to work on whatever we were already doing, while he would, and this is the freaky part, call us out one by one so he could take our picture, alone in the storeroom next to the class. We all, of course, are creeped out by this, but nobody said anything to him. A couple months pass, so close to the end of the school year, we've yet to see these photographs once. We kept asking him about it, but he'd always have some lame excuse as to why we hadn't done each other's portraits with them. Now, we were dumb 12-year-olds, and we weren't complete idiots. We knew this wasn't exactly normal. I'm pretty sure one kid even told a pupil support teacher about it because, it was effing creepy. By the time we were in our 3rd year, none of us had seen those photos once, and we didn't want to imagine what he'd done with them. By now, pretty much the whole school knew that Mr. Roberts was a creep. So much so that a group of the then 5th year kids decided to sneak into his classroom while we weren't there and look around. We didn't find the photographs he'd taken of us, but we did find something else strange. There was a pair of sex dice, and they weren't even tame either. The stuff that was written on them was incredibly descriptive. Thus, of course, begged the question as to why the F a school teacher would have a pair of sex dice in his desk. The news quickly spread, and soon everyone knew about them. In a couple of weeks, Mr. Robert disappeared from the school completely. So yeah, he was definitely the weirdest and most wildly inappropriate person I've ever met. Yeah, that's just wrong. When I do work for the city, sometimes I have to go to the scariest, poorest areas near downtown. One particular run, I was always seeing the same guy wearing a big pimp hat and holding down the corner of a long line of people waiting for the liquor store to open early in the morning. He spends all day screaming, "I'm a pimp!" super loud, super aggressively, and loaded with sass. I look forward to that run every time because I'll get to see him. He is the big pimp guy. When I lived in Hawaii, I used to meet a lot of weirdos. It's hard to pick a winner out of all of them, but I'll go with the crazy Welsh guy. for this entry. I was sitting at a bus stop reading when he approached me. Like to read, huh? The caps lock is appropriate here because he always spoke like he had just found out you were fucking his wife, and then just barely refrained from going completely ballistic. Yeah, I said. I have a book of poems I've written. Would you like to read them? I guess so, I said. He then thrust a manila envelope at me and said, They're written backwards because they're about who the Jews stole time. I think it's supposed to be how. Thanks, I said. I hope you like them. He said this and he walked away. According to the writing on the packet, he was the co-president of the Hawaii Welsh Astral Society, which met weekly at a nearby park. The poems began with photocopies of a bunch of news articles that he had annotated with comments I couldn't make any sense of before getting into the poetry itself, which made no reference to Jews anywhere, but I could see that they were dated in reverse chronology, which I guess is what he meant by them being written backwards. They were not very good poems. One time in Tel Aviv, I went for lunch with some random people from a hostel. Some guy just came off the street, sat down at our table, ate a few french fries, and walked away. Weird. When I was 20, I worked at an automotive parts warehouse. New employee starts. Everything is fine with a few months. Note, he is extremely quiet. Didn't say much. A couple of the guys decided to Facebook him to find out more about him. Turns out he wears Hello Kitty ones and memes that he had started that had guys kissing and said, if you are not okay with this, unfriend me kind of stuff. All types of strange costumes that could be considered to be flamboyant rainbow yoga pants. The whole 9 yards. Word gets around to the supervisor, who apparently is extremely homophobic. Supervisor starts talking about how gay and strange he is in earshot from the guy. Didn't see him for about 30 minutes. Turns out he heard the supervisor. I assume this is when he disappeared. Guy quits without any notice or even saying any words, really just ignoring the phone calls and emails from my boss. Hello Giddy Kai calls a month later, threatening the supervisor's life, saying he will regret what he said, and that he will make sure the supervisor never tells another person. Nothing actually ever happens. No one took it very seriously, so the police were not called, which was very dumb on my ex-employer's part. I wasn't so worried about him myself because I was extremely kind to him and formed a sort of work friendship with him. Seems like a good guy's just got some issues. But he was very strange, looking back. There's a guy near where I live who's convinced he's a police officer. He goes around on a bike with a PVC pipe strapped into it and kids' sirens on top. He doesn't even have a mental illness. He's just bonkers. Some woman I used to babysit for, and she would ask me questions and just smile and uncomfortably stare and like a weirdo, and then I would talk to her and ask stuff, and she would not take her eyes off me and just keep staring and nodding. There was a kid I went to school with. In fact, he was gifted with me. Very bright kid, but I don't know, ADHD maybe. Always getting into trouble, always running around when he wasn't supposed to, etc. Lost touch after high school. Later found out he's now serving a life sentence for murder in a drug deal gone wrong. Intellect and sanity aren't always equal. I had a friend I met at a skating rink I went to weekly. We were friends for maybe 2 years. He went out to California one year, and the next time I saw him, he was weird. He suddenly was extremely religious, and things escalated very quickly. He told me he could hear God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit talking to him, and he could see people's souls. He then told me that he baptized himself, and that Jesus' soul replaced his own, and that was the second coming, that he was the second coming of Jesus. Now, I never read the Bible, but he told me I was his Mary Magdalene, and that another of his friends was really his John the Baptist. He started trying to get a following. He, 26, started dating a 16-year-old girl. He started going to church to reveal who he was. They shunned him, and he was really upset. Eventually, after a few months of this, he seemed to suddenly change his mind. He was Shiva, destroyer of the worlds. He was yelling at people, angry that no one believed that he was truly a divine. He got really pissed, and that's when I checked out of his life. He went from being a cool guy I hung out with to a weird religious psycho guy. Definitely the strangest person I've met. I worked at a retail store a couple years back, and I had this one customer. I never really got his name. He spoke very quickly, and whenever he went shopping, he would come up and ask for a lottery ticket, talking about how he had solved the system and how he wouldn't be there long. On the bright side, he always promised me money when I gave him the ticket, and always said that he would come back soon to cash in the jackpot. He also seemed to really hate old people for some reason. One of the other employees, who had been working there for about 17 years at that point, told me he had been rather smart, but hit his head during a car crash. Whether that was true or not, I cannot confirm. Cousin of my buddy used to hang out with us all the time. Missing 3 teeth, smoked like a chimney, told long-winded stories about all the secret op missions he went on over the years while in the military. He was 19 at the time and spent most of his life playing WoW and Diablo. Tried to convince us that he was a real-life demon hunter. Shit on the neighbor's car at a party. Said he spent a month in the hospital because his insides were liquefying and solidifying at the same time, and the doctors named a disease after him. Told us all that he was going through hormone replacement therapy because he was going to become a woman. By then we were just like, yeah, you do you, man. I found out at one point he was basically selling himself to dudes on Craigslist. I literally have no idea what to believe about that guy. Back in the day, I worked as a lifeguard at a park near my high school. Everyone who worked at the pool went to the high school except for this one guy, Greg. Greg never said a word to any of us, but would read the Bible in between his time on the stand and bicycle jet immediately during his shift. There's nothing wrong with reading the Bible or keeping yourself to yourself, but it was apparent Craig did not favor any of us and would go out of his way to avoid speaking to us. We just weren't his cup of tea. I suspect because we were all sinners. I think he got raptured in 2011. Godspeed, Greg. There's this guy who is a food developer in our lab. He's one of the strangest people I have ever met. 31, lives with his mom, breeds Mancoon cats. I don't know what those are. Likes to sit in the dark and listen to joke music. He has this big pickup truck, and 2 weeks ago he drove over some woman's bonnet. But, all the way over it. None of us could understand how he couldn't have stopped sooner. You never know if he's telling the truth. I've asked him if he's added preservatives to a sample, and he'll say yes. I'll ask him if he's sure, and then he'll say no. We divide work, and for some reason he ends up not doing his own, but some of everyone else's, but doesn't really have an explanation as to why he isn't doing his own. Last week, he needed to add a tiny bit of water back into a vitamin blend sample we were presenting to a customer the next day, and instead of using a pipette, he uses his fingers and flicked water into the mix, acting as if it was totally fine to do this right in front of his manager. The whole office is pretty baffled. Years ago, when I was working at a shipping and copying place, similar to Kinko's, a guy would come in every so often with stacks of newspapers. He would cut up parts of different articles and tape the sections together to form his own stories. Then run what he made through the copier to make it look like it was one actual article. He would then show them to me and tell me they were about him. Usually, the finished article was a combination of world news about terrorism and the sports section. The overall story was that he was a CIA agent fighting terrorism, and his cover was being the quarterback for the Chicago Bears. A pretty normal-looking patient that came in in for a typical complaint. However, she was then telling me that she was a doc and how she was talking to Bambi in her parking lot because Bambi comes and sees her every day. I was just in awe of how normal she looked at first. We get crazy people all the time in healthcare, but they normally dress off or are acting strange somehow, and that tips you off right away. I went to a wilderness survival school, and there was this guy there named Charlie who never wore a shirt, rode this really beat-up motorcycle everywhere, and mined Bitcoin for a living. He didn't bring a tent, so he slept on the tarp on the ground for the whole week and ate canned beans even though we provided meals. He cried a lot and hugged everyone at the end of the week. Charlie was pretty cool, though. And the last one. I used to run in drug circles, so I've met a lot of weird characters. I guess schizophrenic people are cheating, so I'll tell you this little anecdote. About 20 years ago, I had a store. Every Monday morning, this well-dressed, little well-spoken white lady in her early 60s would come in and buy a carton of Marlboro menthols. Weird thing about her was that she reeked of shit. Like she had a swarm of river... She had swam in a river of shit, and I guess she knew it, too, hence the early morning visits when no one else was around. After she left, I had to air the place out for an hour. I've told the story before, and people have said that maybe she had one of those colostomy bags. I don't know. I mean, if her bag was full every time she came in and then exploded under her clothes, then maybe. But there was no visible shit stains on her. As I said, she was always well dressed. Well, there you go. There's some strange people. If you've had some strange people incidences or you'd like to comment on this, please do so down below in the comments. Like this video, share it with someone, subscribe to the channel. Any of those things would help, and I'd appreciate it. If not, go check out another video. There's a lot of different stuff on this channel. And I do appreciate you watching and listening. I appreciate all my subscribers, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.